It's now time for the Billy C. Show, part of the BillyCBoxing.com network.
And we're coming to you live from the Billy C Studios in Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Calogero, and it's time for the Bill Calogero. See, that's why I murder everybody's name. I can't even say my own damn name. That's why I'm Billy C. I'm Bill Calogero, and it's time for the Billy C Show. Good morning, good day, good evening, whenever you're watching or listening. I hope you're doing okay today. All right, today's show, she's being brought to you in part by my book, of course. I haven't sold enough copies yet, so buy one. If you want me to stop hawking my book, buy a couple of dozen copies. You can get a copy right now while you're watching or listening to this very show. Just go to Amazon. Go to Amazon.com or drop me an email, Billy at Talkin' Boxing. That's TALKIN. I got somebody from Portugal just threw me off. That's Billy at TALKIN BOXING.com. Give a shout out to everybody that's already in the chat room. My man Jesus, my man Joel, and Andre coming from Portugal. I love it, and he's telling me he's been watching us for years. That's great. That's great. Today's show is also being brought to us in part by the website. Check it out, BillyCBoxing.com. You can get updates on this show, plus the latest boxing news. And make sure you check out Dax Khan's column, where he's been pretty active with that. And today's show is being brought to us in part by this year's New York State Boxing Hall of Fame induction banquet. And I'm getting in. I think I finally got in there, and I'd love to have you guys come and join me for that. Just visit our website, BillyCBoxing.com, and click on the banner. I'm trying to find a copy of the banner right now so you can see, but it's on BillyCBoxing.com, and all you got to do is click it, and you'll get all the information about the event on the website. Where the heck is it? Losing my mind here. Well, we don't have it. So if you go to the website, you will see it. Click it, get all the information, and I'd love to see that. As a matter of fact, if you get yourself some tickets and show up, come on up to me. I'm going to bring some of my books with me, and I'll sign one and give it to you for nothing. Just come on up to the banquet and tell me that you heard me say on this show that I'll give you a free book. So, hey, you got it. My man Coach just popped in the chat room. Glad to see you. And by the way, if you're watching or listening on another platform, we are broadcasting simultaneously on several different platforms. Come on into the YouTube chat room, and we will get your thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, whatever. I'll talk about it right now. All right, today's topic. I want to get into today's topic, and my question is, how can boxing be successful moving forward? How can boxing be successful moving forward? I have some pretty good thoughts on that. But first, let's get to some boxing news. We had this past week, we had super middleweight number one in the WBO ranked Diego Pacheco. Improved to 22-0 with 18 knockouts when he stopped Maciej Saluki in that fight. It was on DAZN. Saluki drops to 32-3. Also, keeping his winning ways, you have the monster, Naoya Inoue, improved to 28-0 with 25 knockouts when he fought and beat TJ Donaghy, who was unable to fight. He had to stop. And I will tell you this, I thought Inoue wasn't his usual monster self. He seemed to respect the much older opponent. So those were some results. And I also wanted to mention that some boxing news. My man Johnny Fisher. I told you guys to keep an eye on him. He's in the heavyweight division. The Romford Bull. He's 12-0 with 11 knockouts. He's taken on an experienced veteran in Andre Rudenko. And that's taking place September 28th on DAZN. Make sure you check that out. Another thing I wanted to mention, my man Terrence Crawford went against what I talked about on our last show. I thought maybe he should stay in the welterweight division. It looked to me in his last fight that the size difference did make a difference. I know his opponent's style, Marjuramov's style, was a little confusing for him. But I also think that he didn't have as much pop behind those punches. And I thought maybe he would go back down to welterweight. I thought he should go back down to welterweight and take on a guy like Boots Ennis. I think that would be a good fight. But nonetheless, he announced that he's staying in the junior middleweight division at least for the WBA, and he vacated that belt. Now he's still listed as an interim champion, I believe, for the in the junior middleweight division in the WBC, but and the WBO, but he's I believe he's still listed as a champion in some of the other sanctioning bodies of the welterweight division, but we'll see about that. And lastly, they announced that Tim Tszyu is going to challenge the IBF World Junior Middleweight or Super Welterweight Champion Bakaram Murtazalivich. That's the guy. He's the one he's taking on. So anyway, and this is what prompted me to have my topic today. When you look at these guys that are getting these title shots and other fighters that aren't, and you say to yourself, WTF, what happened to Sebastian Fundora fighting a rematch with Tim Tszyu, and all of a sudden they sprinkle in Errol Spence to fight Fundora, which I thought was crazy. And the last thing I heard was Terrence Crawford potentially fighting Fundora for his belt and the interim belts that they got. But here's the thing. One of the biggest problems I believe that boxing faces now, and it's not that it just happened. It's been going on. And I think that, we do have a couple of players in the sport of boxing today, namely His Excellency, and we got some good promoters that are willing to cross promote, meaning fighting other fighters that are with other promotional companies. Eddie Hearn, of course, Oscar De La Hoya. Listen, you could say what you want about Oscar, but I still feel he's a top promoter, and I hope that some of the younger fighters that they've signed stick with him. And he's another decent player, as is Queensberry Promotions. So I mean, they're all willing to play nice. And Bob Arum, as long as he's getting money thrown in his face, he's willing to work and play nice as well. The promotional company, in my opinion, that is garbage, I spit on them, is the PBC. They think that they're half the problem. And, getting to the root of the problem with boxing that we face today, I think a lot of it is the sanctioning bodies. I used to say it's the sanctioning bodies and the promotion companies, because they weren't willing to fight other fighters from different promotional companies. And the reason really was because of the success of the UFC. I mean, let's face it, Dana White started his league. He was able to control the purses, and, he made the fights everybody wanted to see. The fighters couldn't say, no, I don't want to fight him. And that's the way it is. PBC tried to copy it and bamboozled all of us as fight fans when they came out. And I was in a discussion with somebody the other day, and they were like, well, if they only kept going, they were so good. They put all that boxing on for free. Let's be real, boys and girls. Al Heyman never reached into his own pocket for a nickel, not once. If you recall, they got all this money that he kind of scammed from, at least the way I look at it, as he scammed from potential advertisers, and he had a war chest full of substantial money. And what he did was he bought deals with all those television networks that we saw for free, right? Well, once that war chest full of coin left, now we start to see that there's no fights. Occasionally, we get one from the PBC. They're never that great. There's always retread fighters involved, and it's not for free. They're all pay-per-view because he's trying to make more money. And the move with Errol Spence Jr. by elevating him to a potential title shot coming off a loss was just ridiculous in my opinion. Coach is saying here, it's a woke move to the WWE. The truth of the matter is my man Coach has been saying that boxing is just like the WWE for at least a half a dozen years now. I've talked about it and quoted him on this very show, and it's true. Hey, when I get in the ring, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to knock him out. I'm knocking him out. They push, they shove, they fight. And then the real fight happens, and, they're tapping each other. They're running around the ring, doing their best Floyd Mayweather impersonation. I mean, it's terrible. Let me show you an example. Now, the one of the biggest problems with boxing today is all the sanctioning bodies, right? I mean, if we just focus on the four major sanctioning bodies, potentially you have four champions in the same weight division, okay? When you sprinkle in regular champions or interim champions or whatever, you could potentially have 8 world champions in the same division, all right? Potentially 8. And if you want to take it even further, you could sprinkle in champions in recess and every other friggin' thing that they come up with. All right. It's ridiculous. Now, that not only is it ridiculous for one weight class, but it carries all the way through to 16 weight classes. All right. That's another part of the problem. All the different weight classes. And then when you look at the rankings, just like I said, they ordered this fight. Well, I'll get to another fight later. But they ordered the Tim Tszyu fight. That particular fight, I mean, okay, that champion isn't well known. I can't even pronounce his name. But Tim Tszyu, he was a guy that was supposed to be, one of the tops in that fight, which I said last time. I'll say it again. They should have never let that fight continue with the amount of blood at the rate Tim Tszyu was bleeding. That was a scam. And the guy hasn't fought since. Now he's getting another world title shot. Here's the problem. All right. If you look back, hey, Coach just pinned me out. I'm reading this book right now. Coach just said, check out this book on Billy C's desk. Lou Ambers. All right. The reason why I have this book on here, I just started reading it. I got sidetracked a little. But my man, Mark Allen Baker, who's the author of this book, is going to come on the show. I promised him as soon as I finish. Now, he didn't realize that I'm a one word at a time reader. No, I am going to get to it. I actually started it already. I'm all the way up to page 7. But I do plan on finishing it. Lou Ambers, I always loved this guy. And the reason I loved him is because Rocky Marciano said that he was a fan of Lou Ambers, and it was one of his idols. And the reason why Lou Ambers was one of Rocky Marciano's idols is because Rocky Marciano's father loved Lou Ambrose. I was going to say his real name, Ambrose. He's an Italian, and he was in upstate New York. So yes, buy a copy and make sure you tell Mark Allen Baker that Billy C sent you. It's a great read so far. And I love Lou Ambers. So and the part I'm reading, he's giving you a little history about bootleg promotions in upstate New York and the kind of dollars that they were paying or not paying fighters. Very interesting book. So get yourself a copy. All right. So here's I just want to try and put it in perspective for you guys and girls about the problem with the sanctioning bodies and all the rankings. Listen, I don't want the sanctioning bodies to get pissed off at me. Mauricio Suleiman was one of our best guests that we had on this show a couple of years back. He's a real nice guy, and I'd love to have him back on. But I mean, he's just one of the sanctioning bodies. Now, each one of these sanctioning bodies think that they're the only sanctioning body. That's why they strip people when they unify the belts. But I've taken the Ring magazine's ratings for a few decades. I'm going to start with 1960. All right, in 1960. Now, it's easy with the rankings in 1960 because there was only one world champion for every division. There was only 10 world ranked contenders for each division. And oh, by the way, there was only 8 divisions, which is a whole nother thing that I loved about that era. And that is another thing. It's never going to go. Listen, the sanctioning bodies are never going to take their claws out of the sport of boxing and take their claws out of you guys, the fans, because they make their money from it, okay? But if all of a sudden I could wave a magic wand and make something happen, I would make, in boxing, I would make only the 8 divisions again and one world title, one sanctioning body, and that's it. But check out the fighters. In 1960, Floyd Patterson was the heavyweight champion of the world. Now, I'm picking this just because I want to go down. I have all the champions here, but look at the heavyweight division in 1960. Sonny Liston was ranked number 1. Now, as you know, Sonny Liston is another great book that I read, and we had my man Paul Gallagher on this show. Sonny Liston, I mean, that was a great guest. I'm going to have him back on. One of my favorite all-time fighters is Sonny Liston. And anyway, he was ranked number 1. As you know, or I hope you know, well, most people listening to this show knows, that Sonny Liston ended up fighting and beating Floyd Patterson for the world heavyweight title. But the number 2 ranked fighter was a guy that fought and lost and won against Floyd Patterson, Ingemar Johansson. Eddie Machen was ranked at number 3. Zora Foley at number 4. Henry Cooper at number 5. Mike DeJohn at number 6. Robert Clearo at number 7. Alan Mileff at number 8. Dick Richardson at number 9. And Joe Erskine at number 10. You know, here's another thing that I just realized. I can pronounce all these guys' names. That's great. But when you look at these heavyweights, okay, especially, the first 4 or 5, they would all be champions today. Eddie Machen is a forgotten guy. Zora Foley, I mean, they were both beaten by Sonny Liston, but they were good quality fighters, especially in 1960. Light heavyweight champ, Archie Moore. Come on. He ended up fighting for the heavyweight title as well. Paul Pender was the middleweight champion. Sugar Ray Robinson had lost the belt to him, and he was actually ranked all the way down at number 5 before he climbed back up. And this was kind of the end of his career anyway. He only fought for another 4 years, I believe. Welterweight, Benny Kid Paret. Now, if you remember, he ended up fighting a guy who everyone claims killed him. The truth, Emil Griffith, I'm sorry. But the truth of the matter is that, the fight with Gene Fulmer was the fight previous, and we have it up there if you haven't watched it. Gene Fulmer fought Benny Kid Paret before, it was like 3 weeks before he fought Emil Griffith. That's the fight, I believe, started, unfortunately, his death. But lightweight, Hall of Famer. Have you heard of him? Joe Brown, great fighter. I mean, you look at these guys, Davey Moore, featherweight champion. The bantamweight division was vacant at that time, but Eder Jaffe, the French fighter, was ranked number 1. They used to fight. Number 1 used to fight number 2. That became the champion. Doesn't it make sense? That doesn't happen today. The flyweight Pone Kingpech was the champion in 1960. My point is that all 10 of these ranked fighters were all quality fighters. If you were number 10 in the world in any weight class, in the top 8 weight classes, you were a top quality fighter. Then you moved to 1970, right? At that time, a decade later, Joe Frazier was the world heavyweight champion. Muhammad Ali ranked number 1. George Foreman ranked number 2. Oscar Bonavina was ranked number 3. People look at him as a bum. He would be a champion today. Same thing with Jerry Quarry. Jerry Quarry fought all those guys. He was ranked at number 4. Henry Cooper, Mac Foster, Sonny Liston was still in the mix 10 years later. Bob Foster, champion in the light heavyweight division. Middleweight champion, Carlos Monzon, Nino Benvenuti, Emil Griffith are all in there. Monzon was a champ, but they were the ranked fighters. In the welterweight division, for a cup of coffee, Billy Backus was the world champion. Nicolino Lachey was the champion in junior welterweight division. Lightweight division, Kenny Buchanan, who one of the greatest fights I ever saw 3 years later from this was the fight between Kenny Buchanan and Roberto Duran from Madison Square Garden. I mean, if you never saw that fight, the list goes on. All the Ruben Oliveras for a bantamweight champ. I mean, top quality fighters. 1980. Let's move to 1980. Larry Holmes was the champion. And then look at the contenders. Mike Weaver, Jerry Cooney, Leon Spinks had moved up into that division. Jerry Coetzee, Trevor Bervick, Greg Page, Kenny Norton was still in the mix. And one of Matthew Saad Muhammad was the champion in the light heavyweights, but not ranked number 3. James Scott, guy from Rawway Prison. I remember watching his fights from the jail on TV. It was great. I mean, my point here, look at the welterweights in 1980. Sugar Ray Leonard was the champ. Tommy Hearns, number 1. Wilfred Benitez, number 2. Pepino Cuerveras is number 3. Roberto Duran was already in the welterweight division by 1980. He was a great fighter in the lightweights. Junior welterweight, Aaron Pryor. I mean, just listen to all these names, right? That's 1980. I gave you all of them, 60, 70, 80, right? Now we come to 1990, and things start getting, they started putting out the pound for pound. Who's number 1 ranked pound for pound fighter in 1990? Who do you think? Julio Cesar Chavez. Now, I've saw on social media recently that people are saying Julio Cesar Chavez wasn't even that good. I saw a post that Mayweather claimed that he's better than him. Come on. Julio Cesar Chavez was a great fighter. Pernell Whitaker, Sweet Pea, number 2. Michael Nunn, number 3. These are all pound for pound. Meldrick Taylor, number 5. Heavyweight title for the ring. So now the belts started splitting up, right? So now, you had these, the ring ratings were separate. Wasn't the world champion up until this point. Actually, up until the 80s, there was only one champion, and it was the same as the ring, right? Now we start splitting it up, but the ring kept true. They kept, their own rankings. And we still had some decent fighters. I mean, look at the names. Michael Nunn, Carl Williams for heavyweight was a good fighter. Razor Ruddock, Mike Tyson, of course, Evander Holyfield, Riddick Bowe, Ray Mercer, my man Ray. George Foreman was on his comeback, right? We just talked about him in the 70s, so some great fight. Johnny Nelson over from the other side of the pond. Carlos De Leon was a cruiserweight champion, and he was still in the mix, right? You get to 2000. Let's jump to 2000. This is where it gets crazy. I mean, pound for pound, don't underestimate Sugar Shane Mosley. He was pound for pound number 1, according to the ring in the year 2000, And heavyweight division looked like this: Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, Kirk Johnson, Evander Holyfield, David Tua Mantua, Klitschko, Oleg Moskayev, Michael Grant, Hasim Rahman, Chris Bird. I mean, we all know these guys. These were all, and it goes on and on when you get to the lower weight classes. Now, let's fast forward to today. Yes, Chase is asking me, was I a Michael Nunn fan? Yes, second to none. I mean, Michael Young, he kind of fizzled out overnight, but Michael Nunn was a talented fighter. I love those guys. That whole era. And I say this all the time. If you would have asked me in the 80s if I thought I was witnessing the last great era of boxing, or even in the early through the early 90s, I would have laughed, because I would have said to you, no, this isn't a great era. Look at the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. But now, when you look back and in retrospect, I mean, the 80s were loaded with talent. All these super, when people talk to me, oh, back in the day, they talk, oh, back in the day when Sugar Ray Leonard. I'm like, what? Back in the day to me is Sugar Ray Robinson, or even further back. Let's go to Harry Greb. Let's go to Stanley Ketchel. Sugar Ray Robinson, when I was a kid, he was still fighting, so, it's tough. That was the problem. They're commenting on Michael Nunn, and coach is saying Mike got involved in dealing drugs. Yeah, that was his problem. And it's a shame. It's a shame. And he's also saying Duran versus Buchanan made me a Duran fan. Listen, you watch that fight. Duran, the funny thing about Roberto Duran is I was just as guilty of being, not as knowledgeable about Roberto Duran as I should have been years ago. I started really, knowing about him after he was a great lightweight. I really wasn't following the lightweight division as much, but then going back and reviewing those fights and seeing how great he was. And, my late great friend and former co-host Sal Rocky Senecola, we got to call the first fight that Roberto Duran lost for the title. He went and regained it. But Roberto Duran is one of the greatest lightweights ever, if not the greatest. Yeah, coach, that low blow, just when I watched that fight, I feel some pain down there, but in any event, so jumping back to the rankings today. So this is how the rankings look today. All right. So we're talking about as of today, right? In the heavyweight division, you got Usyk is the world champ, right? Wrong. He's the world champion in WBC. He's half the world champion in WBA, and he's a WBO half champion. Why you say half? Because Manuel Char in the WBA is still the regular heavyweight champ, which I don't know how that. I don't know who he must be related to the WBA. Because I don't know how this guy is still there, but they have the balls. The WBA has the balls. Speaking of Roberto Duran and Kenny Buchanan, he has the balls. I said, did you hear what I said? The WBA has the balls to put regular next to their world champion. He's our world champion. Oskander Usyk is our super world champion, but our regular world champion. So Manuel Char gets to walk around with a belt and say, I am the WBA's regular champion. Don't confuse me with their super champion, And Daniel Dubois, if you recall, Usyk gave up his title. He was stripped, but he gave up his title through the media. And Daniel Dubois ended up with that title because he was the interim champ. So he's actually the IBF world champion. So Anthony Joshua will be fighting Daniel Dubois for that world title. But even the WBO has Joseph Parker as an interim champion. So right there, okay, the WBC and the IBF don't have any other champion other than one guy. But we got 4 major sanctioning bodies, right? We got 6 world champions. And here's the worst part. Usyk beat Tyson Fury, right? Okay, well, WBC has Tyson Fury ranked number 1. I agree with that, right? I agree with that. WBA has him ranked number 2. Disagree. And how they could put Martin Bakole at number 1, okay, it's 1, 2, all right. But the IBF doesn't even have Tyson Fury in the mix. Now, you can understand it when Tyson Fury was a WBC champ, but he's fighting for all the other belts again. Now, the reason why he's not rated, because one of the belts that won't be on the line is the IBF title, right? So all of a sudden, he's not even on the ratings list. And by the way, neither's the number 1 or number 2 guy, which is ridiculous. How sanctioning bodies could have ratings that there's nobody in the slot. So when you look at the IBF, you got number 1, number 2. There's nobody that's good enough to be in number 2. But we got Anthony Joshua at number 3. I don't know about you guys, but wouldn't it make sense if Anthony Joshua was number one? You just move everybody up a notch. I mean, what are they saving it for? I'll tell you what they're saving it for. They're saving it for the check because half these guys pay to get ranked. Don't even think otherwise. Coach will back me up on that. It's a joke. And it goes on. You could look at every single one of these divisions. Look at Canelo, right? Canelo supposedly is the world super middleweight champ, right? WBC has him as a champ. WBA has him as a champ. Oh, that's right. The IBF doesn't have him as a champ. He's not even ranked. It's vacant, right? WBO has him as a champ. You think Canelo would be even ranked? Nope. He's not even ranked in the IBF. I understand the reasons because they're trying to separate. They're the cause. They're trying to separate these fighters. Considering, if you go and read the book, The Rise and Fall of the Sweet Science, but it was written by Mike Silver. All right. He chronicles and shows you why fighters were better back in the day. And the main reason, now we talked about this last week. I admit that the fighters physically and mentally, well, I don't know about, definitely scratch that. Definitely not mentally, but physically and nutritional wise, the fighters today they could be better. But the biggest reason Mike Silver makes in his book, and what I agree with, is the numbers. It's the numbers. What's up, my man Rick? He's in the chat room as well. It's the numbers. And what I mean by the numbers is, I forget the exact figure, okay? But he was comparing, I believe, the year 2000 and maybe 1940, let's say. It was something like that. And in New York State alone, in 1940, it was like 2,000 boxers that had licenses, that were licensed professional fighters, like 2,000, right? And in 2000, it was like a couple of hundred, and that goes across the board. It was that drastic when he punched all the numbers in. And so you say to yourself, okay, and in addition to what I was saying here, looking at the rankings in 1960, where you only have 10 top 10 contenders for 8 divisions. And then add to the fact that you got another couple of thousand fighters that are all, challenging for those spots and champion. When you rise to the top, number 10 ranked fighter back in those days was a damn good fighter. Today, number 10 fighter, you don't even know. You look at the heavyweight, right? All right. So for WBC, Hrgovic is number 10. I'm okay with that. But how does Frank Sanchez or Efe Ajagba, in all due respect, get above Hrgovic? Hrgovic has fought some better people. Fabio Wardley, who I loved him fighting. They had a great fight, and they're having a rematch. But how does he get above Hrgovic? You look at the WBA's top 10, Cassius Chaney. He just lost. How is he still number 10? And he's above, he's above Derek Chisora and Jarrell Miller, listen, I'm not even saying they should be top. How does Michael Hunter get to be number 3 in the WBA? Mike Perez is number 5. Lenier Piro is number 4. Who's he? I never even saw him. I don't miss boxing much. I never even heard of him. Right? It's crazy. You go down and you look in all these divisions, and you look at the middleweight division. All right, the middleweight division. This is today. Carlos Adames is the WBC champion. Well, Hazma Shiraz. Now, we just got introduced to Shiraz this year. Basically, he started rising. He had a good performance on one of the Saudi Arabia shows. Then in the last card, it was on the undercard of, I believe, the Terrence Crawford fight. He looked really good. But is he number 1 in the middleweight division? He's ahead of Eubank. Shane Mosley's number 1 for the WBA. Hey, I loved Sugar Shane Mosley Sr., but Sugar Shane Mosley Jr. number 1 for beating Danny Jacobs, who was out of the ring for a while. and had fought the best towards the end of his career, how does he catapult to number one? And the same thing in the IBF. Guess what? There's no number one or number two guy, but Mikhail Kolovich is number three, ahead of Shiraz. There's no rhyme or reason. It's crazy. You want to get boxing back into a place where we can look forward to a bright future of boxing. There's things that you got to do. Number one, the fighters have to fight more often. If you go and look through the history of boxing, and I'm sure Coach will back me up here, you go through the history of boxing, you take the best ever, the greatest fighter of all time, Sugar Ray Robinson, okay? You got to look at his record and put it in perspective, because the last decade of his career, he wasn't at the top of his game. He was already 40 years old, all right? And you look at him and you look at his fights, right? Guys like Harry Greb, right? You look at these guys' careers, and, they would fight 3 times a month, 4 times a month. Sam Langford fought, twice a week once, several times, and the thing is that when you look at those records and you look at the amount of fights, they weren't in knockout, drag-out fights in every one of those fights. That's been the knock. Oh, look at Sugar Ray Robinson's record. Look at some of the opponents. Okay. But that was in place of sparring. These guys, boxing was a trade. When you became a boxer, you started out sweeping the gym. Then you became an amateur. Then you became a pro. Then after your career was over, you became a trainer. You became a manager or a promoter. The boxing people they knew the sport. Today, all you need is enough money to buy the corner's license, and poof, you're a trainer. You don't know a left hook from a fish hook, but if you pay the $50 for the license, guess what? You're in the corner. Same thing. You want to be a manager? Most states don't even make you pass a test. As long as you got the money to buy the license, you're in. Same thing with a promoter. A boxing promoter, all you need to do is have the money to pay for all of the expenses, to become a licensed promoter. So, some of these things need to go back, and with the fighters of yesteryear, they were making a living. So, if they could fight a less than stellar opponent, get a win or have, basically staying in shape. And then when you look, you see that those guys that were fighting 2, 3, 4 times a month, when you dissect the record, you see that they're fighting 4 or 5 top fighters a year, minimum 4 or 5 top fighters a year. So if you fast forward to now and you say to yourself, okay, we've learned some stuff about training, nutrition, injury, brain injury. So maybe the fights once a week is out of the question, right? And sparring sessions can be, managed correctly with headgear and everything else. But a fighter should fight 4 or 5 times a year and not fight the same potato cupcakes that these guys were fighting once a week. That's the difference. You got fighters today that are fighting 3 times a year, and they're not fighting anybody really dangerous. They're fighting, easy wins. If it wasn't for His Excellency over there in Saudi Arabia, we wouldn't even be seeing these matchups. The guys don't want to fight. I'll give you an example. The WBO just ordered a mandatory featherweight between the champion right now, Rafael Espinoza, and believe it or not, they chose the number 1 ranked former champion in Robsy Ramirez. Now, this I agree with. That's the way it should be. The number 1 guy should be the guy who becomes the mandatory. Or if it's a vacant title, you should have number 1 fight number 2, right? Again, I don't disagree. I mean, I disagree with the differences in the rankings, okay? You got a guy that's ranked number 1 and number 2 in one sanctioning body. They're not even in the top 10 of all the others. But still, if you're going to, honor your own fighters, so to speak, you got to have the number 1 fight number 2. But we don't usually see that. Usually you'll see a defense or you'll see a mandatory, some guy come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you're like, I never heard of him. You look at the current rankings, and he slips in there at number 9 or number 12, and it just fits the criteria for the champion. But in this particular case, Ramirez, is ranked number 1 by the WBC and WBO, and the number 8 in the IBF. So to me, this is a rare case where this is going to be a decent fight. Papa says activity matters, a lost start today. But the difference, Papa, is this. I was just saying, the fighters of today do spar a hell of a lot more than they used to. Back in those days, in the Sugar Ray Robinson times and even prior, they didn't spar as much, but they were fighting every single week, so they were staying in shape, staying tuned up, ready for the big fights. But today, the problem with, and I'd be okay with the sparring, right? But what's happened, you used to hear about, you watch sparring in Philadelphia, you're going to see the best fights in sparring. True, but now sparring is even a different level. In the last decade, sparring, now you bring in a sparring partner to fight your fighter, and you give that sparring partner, and Coach can back me on this, you give that sparring partner specific things that you want the fighter that he's brought in to fight to work on. Hey, listen, we need him to work the body, so he's going to work the body. So we want you to position yourself so he can land some body shots. Well, what the hell kind of sparring is that? It sounds like choreographed sparring. So not only are they not fighting real fights, they're fighting potential, one-sided fights for their 3 fights a year, if they fight that often. And in sparring, they're not even really sparring. Listen, fighters don't fight the way they should. All right. And we as fans get fleeced because we're expected to pay for it. We're expected to get this service and that service and all these other things just to watch it. And the truth of the matter is half these fights. Look, I'll admit I'm a gambler. All right. I've always gambled. I don't gamble as much anymore, but, I love sports betting, and that's what I mean. I'm not into the horses, not like that. But I don't even gamble on boxing. If you ever notice the odds on boxing, you know who's going to win. Just look at the odds. When you got to lay $2,000 to win 100 on one guy, and then you would think, oh, if I throw 100 on the opponent, I'll win 2,000. No, the line is you don't even get 2,000. You get 1,200. So you're laying $2,000 to win 100. And you bet 100 and you win 1,200, that's a skewed line. They're not giving this guy a chance, and that's what they're selling you as a pay-per-view. It's totally ridiculous, right? Here's a fighter, all right? Now this is an exception to today. And I don't know if you noticed him. He's not really under the radar, but he's kind of under the radar. Keyshawn Davis, all right? He's returning on November 9th, and, he's going to be fighting Gustavo Lemos in Virginia, where he's from, okay? And you look at this kid, Keyshawn Davis, right? He's got a record of 11-0, 11 fights, right? 7 knockouts. He's got a no contest, so he's fought 12 times, right? Look at his record, boys and girls. The guy has faced combined record of his opposition, 237 wins, 37 losses, and 9 draws. When was the last time you see a guy that had his pro debut against a 4-2-3 fighter? And let me tell you something. When you look at a record of a fighter, 4 wins, 2 losses, and 3 draws, you could make an argument that this guy who's brought in his opponent won those 3 draws, but he was in the hometown and they gave a draw to the hometown favorite. All right. Keyshawn Davis has never fought a guy with a losing record. All right. The combined opposition is impressive, to say the least. And guess what? His 8 of his 12 fights that he's had, if you look at who he's fought, He's fought better than average opposition. This kid is the real deal. When you watch somebody like this and you see that he's fighting the fights that you want to see. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that every single fight needs to be a knockout, drag out fight. But if you're going to fight the slugs that a lot of these fighters fight, okay, if you're going to fight those slugs, you got to be able to fight some real fights at some point during the year. Look, one thing, I say that fighters, I think that professional fighters today should fight no less than 4 times a year in real good fights. If they want to fight 6 or 7 times, that's great, and you got to give them a pass if they're fighting less than stellar opposition. But the kind of shit that I can't stand is a guy like Errol Spence and his promoter PBC, right? Look at Errol Spence. Errol Spence right now in the in the super welterweight junior middleweight division is ranked number 1 in the sanctioning body that everyone thinks is the best. That's the WBC. He's ranked number 1, right? How the hell could that be? He fought over a year ago, and we all know that the rule for most of the sanctioning bodies is you have to fight within a year. Otherwise, you're stripped unless you get a pass, right? He's fought over a year ago, but he never fought in that division. Over a year ago, he fought and lost, got his ass kicked from one end of the ring to the other by Terrence Crawford as a welterweight. And he's ranked number 1 as a junior middleweight by the WBC. And by the way, he hasn't fought in over a year. This is the problem with boxing. You can't have this kind of stuff if you want boxing to survive in the future. You just can't. These fighters today, and I'm not going to blame the fighters because, it's their management, it's the promoters, and it's you because you guys support it. Who the hell is going to buy? Listen, I saw a clip, Edgar Berlanga saying, I'm going to shock the world. I'm going to use my jab and I'm going to knock out Saul Canelo Alvarez. Never in a million years. Listen, the last time when I watched Berlanga in his last 2 fights, and then especially his last fight, saying how he wanted Canelo, I'm saying to myself, this guy, and Canelo's starting to fade a little bit, right? And I'm saying there's no way that this guy is good enough to fight Canelo. And quite honestly, David Benavidez isn't ready either. The thing about Benavidez is that he's just so big. That's why Canelo doesn't want him. But, Berlanga doesn't have a chance against Canelo. Canelo's got a granite chin. He's going to walk through that jab, and he's going to break this guy down. The fight's not going a distance. It's not a competitive fight. But guess what? Whoever buys it, you are going to pay $90 for this fight. And you get to watch a whole slew of other garbage fights on that card. I saw somebody on social media arguing with me that the card was a great card. It must be a PBC employee. I saw another thing on social media today. Who's the best promoter out there today, right? They had Ellerby, Leonard Ellerby as well. He's not a promoter. First of all, the guy, if you want to put him as the face of PBC, whatever, or Mayweather Promotion, he got fired, I think. He's not a player. They didn't have Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn's number 1 in my opinion today. And in my opinion, a lot of people disagree with me. Right, Papa's saying it's a Boxing After Dark level card. I got news for you. It's even less than that. It's an ESPN, what ESPN used to give us. It's an ESPN card. Okay, Boxing After Dark, I'll give you that. That wasn't Top Guys or Showbox, I mean, in my opinion, the best promoter out there today, if you don't want to sprinkle in His Excellency, because he's really moving up in the rankings as far as I'm concerned, he's a promoter. I mean, come on. Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren from Queensberry. These guys, they're good. You could say Top Rank, but unless there's big dollars, Bob Arum, he's going to keep his guys separate. I think Oscar De La Hoya is a good promoter. He's willing to fight with against other promoters. But I really think aside from some of the guys that were related, that were, connected to Madison Square Garden back in the day, Tex Ricardo, those kind of guys, the greatest promoter in my lifetime was Don King. I mean, people could say what they want about Don King, but Don King, he could take a fight that was between Grandma Ellis and Rocky Marciano, and I mean Grandma Ellis, Jimmy Ellis's grandma, and say and make it sound like it was the greatest fight, that you better lay down your coin because you're going to miss it. I mean, this guy had that kind of that power. I mean, look what he did with Ali and Foreman. He basically he didn't have any money. He just was out of jail. He didn't have any money, and he secured all that money to pay Ali and George Foreman more money than they ever had in their lives. And he made out too. And then what do people say? Oh, he's a crook. Well, because they found out how much money he made. No, when you sign the paper, that's the deal. When you sign the paper, and then you do it as it will. Coach says His Excellency appears to only want real fights. And that's why I think that he's one of the best things for the sport right now, because he's got the money to entice fighters to fight. Look, if you don't think, when I hear people say, and I say it myself, but I don't mean it in the same way. Oh, that guy's a bum. Oh, he can't fight. He can. It's the same thing. I'm a football fan, right? So if you're watching American football, if you're watching, unfortunately, I'm a Jets fan. You're watching football. You've got two teams playing against each other, and you hear somebody say, "Oh, that guy sucks. Oh, that guy sucks." Well, if you're on the NFL, if you're on any NFL team, I don't care if you guys don't win a game. If you're on any NFL team, the third string guy is better than anybody you know. Most people, better than anyone a better athlete than, think about it. The NFL, right? You take the guy that was the super stud in high school that you knew. Everybody had one, right? There was always a guy in high school sports that was the star. He was the quarterback on a football team. He was the star pitcher and home run hitter on the baseball team. He was the point guard in basketball. He was the stud. Everybody loved him. He had all the girls. He's the superstar. He goes to college. Now he joins a college team that's filled with guys just like him. And now he's second string. He's not even as good because his school wasn't as good. And then you take all those colleges and the guys that get drafted, that they end up on the NFL team, right? Well, not every college guy makes an NFL team. I think not even 10%, 8%, something like that. And they get on the team and they have to battle. So by the time you're a starter in the NFL, you're such an athlete. Well, the same as boxing. I'm not going to criticize anybody that has the whats to get in the ring to fight. Because you know what? Every time I ever fought, I was nervous. I was scared. And that's what got me going. And that's the truth. Anybody that tells you that they don't get scared before they fight, they're full of shit, because it happens, unless you're kind of, a little wacko and you like that kind of stuff. And a lot of fighters, Vinny Pazienza is a guy like that, Boom Boom Mancini was a guy like that. Even Rocky Marciano said that he would be nervous before fights, So, the truth of the matter is every fighter, even if they don't have a winning record, even if they don't have a win and they fought 10 times and they lost 10 times, I respect them, okay? But at the end of the day, when you get to be a ranked fighter, and I don't care, even in the skewed rankings today, you need to start fighting real fights. What's happening today is it's become safety first, which, I don't disagree with. I think it's better to stop a fight too soon than too late. But I don't like when a fan is expected to shell out, outrageous amount of money to watch a non-competitive fight. And then to suggest that, not to get political, but it's like the left when they say, when you look outside and you see the sky's blue, and they're telling you, no, the sky's not blue. I know you think it's blue, but the sky is red. Trust us. We know more than you. Well, that's what boxing people try to do too. Hey, I know this fight doesn't look like it's going to be competitive, but it's going to be. You heard them in the press conference, right? He said that he's going to do this and he's going to do that and he's going to do the other thing. They're ripping us off. Boxing is the only sport that fleeces the fan every step of the way. Football doesn't, baseball doesn't, hockey doesn't, basketball doesn't. But you know why? They got TV revenue. They have leagues. They have unions that protect and agents that make sure contracts are in place. This is everything that the UFC has. Boxing doesn't. And don't expect boxing to all of a sudden have that happen, because there's always going to be a sanctioning body or a promoter that's going to say to the guy, hey, listen, I was there's plenty of people have talked about forming a union for fighters, right? And but it won't work. And the reason is because if you get everybody to join a union, all it's going to take is a guy like His Excellency to say, hey, listen, I'll give you $50 million to break that deal and come fight my guy. And it's like, he's already there. It's like, whoa, how'd you get here so fast? And that's the way it is. That's the way it is. But we got, yep. And, Puddle Pond, Ocean Theory, Don King, and the fake USA championships. I don't know. I don't know, Coach. You and I agree on a lot of things, but Don King was a great promoter, in my opinion. You go back and you look at his fights. I mean, when he put on a card, I mean, it was great fights from top to bottom. But here's the thing, Papa, about His Excellency. I saw on social media the other day that said, well, he's just when he runs out of money, he's just, well, here's the thing. He's not going to run out of money. And what he's doing is he's basically building awareness for Saudi Arabia. And now everybody wants to go to, I would love to go to Saudi Arabia and do my show. If he called me, I'd be there. I'd be lying if I wouldn't, if I said I wouldn't do it. As long as you have money and keep having money, you're gonna be tops in boxing. Follow the money, because that's where boxing goes. But anyway, I got a couple of emails to read here. And this one's from my man Jordan. And Jordan says he's from the UK. He says, just caught up on your last couple of shows. I do get behind because I like to binge listen. And I remember the days of 5 2-hour shows a week. Yes, he's been a long listener. I used to do a 2-hour show every day. And those were the days. And the truth of the matter was, it was a morning show, and we did a weekly. So we actually, for a while there, we did 6 shows a week. But 5 days, but 6 shows. And back then, we had sponsorships, and we were on television networks and stuff that don't exist anymore. Streaming put them out, and I guess we lost a lot of fan base because I'm an old man and I feel the way you hear me talking now. And I think Floyd Mayweather isn't the greatest fighter of all time. And I criticize the powers that be. And I'm lucky that the New York State Boxing Hall of Fame decided to have me, because I had my run-ins with New York State Boxing Commission. I lost a life savings, the first show I ever promoted in New York State. But it was a valuable lesson. I was educated. I learned how to do it, and I was successful in other states. Florida, of course, Arkansas, Maine, the Carolinas. We did a lot of shows, and eventually we did another one in New York. But anyway, he says he wants to make a couple of points. You were talking about that there are no old school fighters anymore that have the heart in the fights. I'd like to nominate Del Boy Chisora. That guy fights anyone and goes to war every time. He regularly has to dig deep and show real heart in his fights. He also has a huge cult following that creates the amazing atmospheres in England that I know you appreciate. A prime example was his most recent fight against Joe Joyce. The crowd was loud, very loud throughout the fight, and Chisora had to recover from some huge shots and was in danger of being stopped before he managed to drop Joe late. Not many of his sort around. I'm going to comment on that first before I continue. First of all, there are no boxing fans better and more knowledgeable than the fighters in the UK, than the fight fans in the UK. Not only do I love the fight fans in the UK, I love the fighters from the UK. Chisora is a great example that my man Jordan makes here. England was where modern day boxing as we know it started, and it's there again. They are not afraid to put fighters that are undefeated in against other fighters that are undefeated. They are not afraid to do it, and the fighters respond. And should they lose, their fan base does not all of a sudden get on the internet and say he was exposed, he sucked, he never was. See, I told you. They don't say that. They support him, and they come out even stronger and faster the next time he fights. Look at Nick Wrecking Ball. This guy's going to be defending his title. I love this kid. All right. He had a draw. I kind of thought he lost that fight. But in any event, he had a draw. Then he came back and won the title. This guy's nonstop punching. I believe he was a rugby player. You could see why the fans love him. The U.S. fans are oblivious. We in the United States think our shit doesn't stink. I'll tell you a quick story. I took a fighter. I don't want to mention his name because I love the guy. And I got him a world title fight. I was involved with a sanctioning body. I'm not going to mention, but I was involved in a sanctioning body, and I got him a world title fight in France. Okay, and it was in a really beautiful place in France, but it wasn't really a touristy place. So we were in a restaurant, myself, the fighter, the trainer, and the second, and so we're all in there. And we were having trouble communicating with the waiter and waitresses because nobody spoke English. Well, this fighter stands up and he goes, "Doesn't anybody speak English in this effing place?" And I look at him and I said, "So and so." I go, "What the hell is wrong with you? We're in France. They don't speak English in France." And I said to myself, that's why everybody hates Americans, because we think the world revolves around us. Guess what? It doesn't. And the truth of the matter is for the fight fans here in the U.S., open up your eyes, because the fighters and the fan. Do you ever watch a fight from the UK and not see the diversified fans that are there? There's all ages, from kids, up to people, that are extremely old, even older than me, and they're all singing and having fun and all this stuff. You don't see that in the American, unless Mexican fighters are fighting, and that's because the Mexicans come over. Or if an English fighter comes, they fly over and support their fans. The American fight fans are so tunnel vision, and they need to learn about the sport. That's been my biggest knock, that a lot of younger fans aren't willing to go back and read a book like this on Lou Ambers or Sonny Liston, or my book, by the way. But I mean, the truth of the matter is you got to learn, because YouTube wasn't around back then. You can't punch up a clip. And I say that in my book. When I was promoting my book just before it came out, I was telling everybody about Tom Molyneux and all of this stuff. And I actually got, and I plug it in the book, I actually got an email from obviously a young guy that said, "Hey, could you send me any YouTube clips of Tom Molyneux?" And I'm like, YouTube clips? They didn't even have cameras when he fought, But anyway, moving on with Jordan's email. It says, another point I like to make is Canelo. By no means a fanboy of Canelo, but I can't help but admire the way he's continued to climb through the divisions and fight the champions until he went too far against Bivol, which I think is admirable. His resume was full of top names and champions continuously, and unlike Mayweather, he's targeted champions purely for their belts and didn't cherry-pick names. I don't disagree that Crawford could possibly outbox Canelo and win a decision. Canelo has always been liable to be outboxed, but I don't think we can begrudge Canelo taking on a 6-foot plus Puerto Rican who's a fully fledged super middleweight when he himself is 5'8" and aging. Listen. I think that Canelo. I do respect Canelo. I don't like the Berlanga fight. For a guy in Canelo's position who claims he's fighting for glory and fighting for his legacy, there are some other fights that he could take. I do like the Crawford fight. I know a lot of people disagree with me on that, But I think I like the Crawford fight more for the benefits that it would give to Terrence, because I believe he deserves it. I think the Bivol fight showed that Canelo is beatable from a talented boxer. And I do criticize Canelo for not fighting Bivol in a rematch. But that's going to be the big fight, Bivol against Artur Beterbiev coming up. So we got a couple of good fights coming up. He says, in regards to your show, I really hope you find a way to keep it going. I heard you mention sponsors, but odd, he said, but odd that fails. Could you not ask for a subscription feed again? Price again? I, for one, would be willing to pay a monthly subscription. I'm sure there'd be plenty more. Please exhaust every avenue. I hate to see this show go. There's nothing else like it. And that's from Jordan. He's been listening for over 15 years. Jordan, I appreciate the email. We did have a paid subscription version of the show at one time. It didn't really work out. Nobody wants to fork over any money. The truth of the matter is sponsorship is the way to go. And to be honest with you, not to be a Debbie Downer, but the show, this is probably our last year. We've been doing it for 21 years. I'm looking forward to the New York State Boxing Hall of Fame. I'm looking forward to a couple of fights that are going to close out the year, and whether we continue or not, I will be making that announcement, but I will give you a heads up. Because of our numbers. Our numbers have gone down. We don't have the viewership we used to. And truthfully, that's the driving force. So, but thanks for the email, Jordan. And thanks for being so loyal and following us for as long as you have. And I got another email from my man, Brett. He says, hey, Billy C, I hope you had a good Labor Day weekend. I did. I hope you and your family did too, Brett. He says, good show last week, and the whole segment with Merchant's top 10 heavyweight fighters compared to your guys was interesting. I can't argue with either list. One thing I wanted to say, when you mentioned how he tried to be eloquent, etc., when he called the fights, he reminded me of Gene Tunney. Tunney was into poetry and was not like the average run-of-the-mill boxer, and I think he was largely misunderstood because of it. In the same way, Merchant is cut from the same cloth, but did it in an analytical way, which he was. It's hard to say, but I think Larry just wanted to be different from everyone else and add his own unique flavor while not sacrificing his knowledge of the sport. Great job, Billy C. I'm looking forward to today's show and we'll listen to it on my way to work tonight. That's commuting in style. Yes, it is, my man. Brett is a longtime listener. Great guy. I had really wished that he was going to be able to make it and join me in New York for the Hall of Fame induction next weekend. But I know that his schedule was too tight. Brett, I will say this. I agree. You make a great point about Gene Tunney, but it's a little different. Gene Tunney was there was a lot of fighters that were extremely intelligent and eloquent. My point about Larry Merchant was that I just feel, and I guess this is more old school and showing my age, but I just feel that boxing, is for the guy with the D's and the dotes and I'm going to get that bum, that kind of fighter, that kind of person. I wasn't knocking Larry's intelligence. I just thought it never fit when he was trying to talk about, beating the hell out of somebody, knocking somebody out or beating them into submission. And he's trying to spin it as, saying, big, $1 million words and stuff like that. I just didn't think it matched. But for Larry Merchant, it worked. And I would never question Larry Merchant's knowledge of the game. And if you guys missed that show, you could go back and watch it. But I think the worst part of those rankings was Larry's admission that his time is running out here with us, and it was kind of sad to read that, but it is a reality. Hey, listen, boys and girls, I appreciate you joining us. I know we went a little over. I tried to compensate by starting a little early, but hey, what the hell? But I appreciate it. Do me a favor. Please make sure you follow us on Twitter and YouTube and Rumble, and like us on those things, those places, and also friend us on Facebook, or join our Facebook group, Talking Boxing with Billy C. It's open to the public. All that kind of stuff helps. And make sure you tune in next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Until then, ciao, baby.